too slow. Oh, thank you for that. Okay. All right. So I'm using PowerPoint right now to do this, and I'll go ahead and start the presentation. Please ask me some questions after at the end. I would love to hear your feedback about this. So that's the title over there, real-time transcription for class instruction. Currently teach in Kansai. I just finished my master's this year. Some of my interests are indicated down below. On the right side, you can see where this presentation will be headed. I'll try to give maybe 30 seconds to 1 minute per slide. And I'm sorry if I miss some of the important things. Please ask me if you have any questions. Just to get things cleared up, the terminology that I'm using right now is going to be transcribing and captioning is the act of putting spoken dialogue into text. So I might use transcribing and captioning interchangeably. It can be done in post-production, or it can be done in real time. Actually in Zoom right now, if you can press the caption, there is the option here. I'm not sure if I have admin privileges, but as I'm talking, you can see text at the bottom if you turn on that option. Transcripts are, of course, the archived or recorded text version of dialogue. And subtitles are similar to captions, but they're just basically translated into a different language. And so whenever you watch Netflix or something and you see subtitles, that's the terminology or the definition behind it. All right, so having that out of the way, just a quick question for everybody, and if you could answer me in the chat. I'm curious as to see your input about this, which is my question to you guys is this. My question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied are you with your speaking or your lectures in class? And if you could, 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest, could you please type it in the chat right now so I can see? None. 5, room for improvement. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Okay. I guess this is sort of the whole kikkake for me to start this, the whole idea of using this type of technology is because I didn't have that as much confidence in my speaking ability or how I presented in class. And if you don't do that, it's sort of like you can sense it because the students don't listen to you or they feel listless. There's a type of atmosphere that is sort of like what you're aiming for as a teacher. And for me, I feel like on this scale, I was like a 5 to 6. And so because of that, I did 2 things. Well, the first thing that I did was sort of look into what I could do to improve myself speaking in class. And the second is how to technology that I could use to sort of help myself improve. So we'll go first to the fundamentals. And these are things that I've sort of accumulated over the course of teaching. Okay, so we'll go first with the fundamentals or my speaking best practices. When I lecture, I write key terms on the board to facilitate the students' processing of the information. Write them in big, bold letters and keep it simple, 3 to 4 points. I provide notes or handouts for them, sometimes on the learning management systems, and that helps them as well, just in case some of them also don't show up. I have this thing called presence, and you sort of have to psych yourself before every class. You have to make sure that your voice is coming from your diaphragm. You have a large, you can be heard. Eye contact, not to just one particular student, but from left to right to everybody. Smile and dress well, and of course have a straight posture. I begin my lecture with either a crazy statement, a question, or an anecdote, something that happened to me over the weekend that gets them started. I inspire and create aha moments during the lecture or during the activity. I keep my audience involved when I talk. I either use a variety of software such as Pear Deck, Padlet. I use clickers sometimes and Poll Everywhere. So when I ask a question, I get feedback from them through a multitude of interactive ways. I speak clearly, but when I speak, I'm not really teaching them. I'm more of like talking to them. And I think this is one of the most important things when it comes to best practices. I use a conversational tone. This works just as well when you're talking about grammar. Of course, I convey my enthusiasm for the material, even though I've done it like a million times. You should be uh, energetic about it. And you set aside a moment for students to reflect on your question. Students sometimes have to think. It's not instantaneous when they come up with responses. So 20 to 60 seconds, and you notice that the quality of your answers will be much better. Lectures are not how much you know, but about how much the students learn. Pay attention to body language cues. If they are attentive and if they focus on you and if they have your interest. And finally, having said the body language, sometimes we can misread body language. Do not judge lectures by your student reactions. This only tells half of the story. I'd like to go more into that, but of course we'll be concentrating on transcription today. So anyway, with the fundamentals down, let's go to the next slide. I always have a belief that the classroom should be kinetic. And by saying that, I involve movement. I stand up during activities. They stand up during activities. There's always active participation in lectures. I use physical objects. For example, I'll have a ball, I'll pass it to you, and then I'll ask you a question, throw the ball back at me. I always change their seatings every time so that they don't get too comfortable. And of course, I make sure that there's the optimum temperature and ventilation in the classroom so they don't get too drowsy or sleepy. All right, to the meat of things now. What are subtitles and live transcriptions for? When I started using this technology in classroom, which is basically me talking and subtitles appearing on a projector, I noticed it served not just one purpose, but many, many purposes. Compensating for a small voice or poor acoustics. Sometimes I would teach in big classrooms, so my voice, as loud as it would not project to the end, and so some students would feel left out. And so I would have a projector and they could see what I was talking about also through text. Giving easily understood instructions or important announcements as well. And sometimes the students, of course, practice listening when you're talking to them, but at the same time, the key idea is for them to actually do the activity and to learn through that activity. Having subtitles or having text for them makes it easier for them to understand. During activities, as I go around, it helps, like as I'm talking, and if the students don't understand what I'm saying, sometimes, even though I use very basic language and I give feedback to them and I clarify things, if there's a second screen, they tend to look at that screen and say, oh, that's what Sensei said. I understood half of it, but the other half, they rely on the transcription that's being shown on screen. Sometimes I like to talk about difficult subject matter and grammar points, which I think that native Japanese speakers do much better than me. But I feel that with the subtitles and this point, I'll be transitioning to transcription to translation. It helps me a great deal as well. And I'll show an example of this later. So these things, and finally, recently, to talk about neurodiverse students, basically accommodating different types of learners. Some types of learners like to listen, some type of learners like to see text, some type of learners like to touch. And so with this in mind, I think you're accommodating all types of learners. So we've gone to the why, and we're now going to go to the what. And so as you can see here, my basic setup is to start things off is I have what you call the Rode Wireless Go. And the alternatives are actually using the AirPods or the Sony WF-1000X M3. So I'll take a moment to sort of show it to you guys. And if you can see here, if you can see your screen right now on the right side here, if you can see me right now, I'm not sure if I have the spotlight setting on me right now, but I have a receiver and and I have a transmitter. And of course, if it's AirPods, it's just basically one unit in your ear. And what happens is that you connect via USB the receiver to the laptop, and then afterwards you have the transmitter, which you turn on while you're talking. And on the right side of the screen, as you'll see here, you have a mouse that goes around, and basically I use the wireless mouse to sort of move about my slides depending on where I am at that classroom. Now, the setup for this initially is can be a little bit, how do you say, a little bit intimidating, as it was for me, and as it is probably for a lot of people. But to give you an idea, and so I have everything connected. And let me bring it down over here for you guys. So if you can see in the middle, I plug it in, and with an adapter, and there's links there. You can click on this later. I can send you the PowerPoint presentation at the end. Once I have it all set up and once I have it all turned on, you may have to play around with the settings for this. And to play around with the settings, I'm going to click on this thing here. And this is for Apple users. I think people can see right now my entire screen, right? Go to sound settings, and into input. You should be seeing that this Realtek USB audio, and not your internal microphone. You should be selecting that one. And what's going to happen is you're going to speak into the receiver, which is over here. And as you speak into the receiver, you will be, of course, registering the volume here. And once that's in place, you have the software side set up. To the Windows users, I also have a similar screenshot, if this helps. You go to sound settings and you click on the input, and you should also make sure that it's connected, and that it should also be working around here as well. And so very different desktop OS software, I guess, but at the same time, it's a very simple. Once you get the process down to it, you only have to do this initially. And when you've done that, you're good to go. Again, this is for Windows. And a while ago, I showed you how the setup was for Apple users. Let me just clear that. So you have the first step, which is plugging it in. The second step, which is clipping the receiver on you. And again, you have some alternatives here as well. And then finally, you have the mouse, which allows you to go about with the classroom and sort of click on websites and talk while you're moving it around. Now, I've gotten to sort of the hardware part. Now we're going to go to the software aspect, and finally an actual demonstration of the technology working. I'm sort of teasing to you what's going to actually happen. I haven't actually even shown you transcription yet, but the important thing is the fundamentals and the hardware setup. Now, having said that, a typical class that I have would be something like this. As you can see, and if you can imagine, I'm talking to the receiver, and then the text appears on the screen. I can be anywhere in the classroom while I'm doing this. I'm very fortunate that some of the universities that I teach at have the resources and have been very patient with me in terms of setting this up. It's a projector. A larger version would be something like this. So imagine that you're the student and you're at the back, and that you can see the text there, and they're like, oh, I don't know what teacher is saying. Well, the translation is there, 70 to 80% accuracy rate. I get I sort of get the gist of what the teacher is doing, as compared to before when he was talking too fast. I had no idea what he was saying, but at least now as he's talking, I can see the text. And so this is typically what's happening. I don't know if I've mentioned the setup time. The setup time, I usually come to class early, about 5 minutes beforehand. We'll get more into the start, beginning, and end of class later. But as you can see, this is a typical setup with Google Translate. Later on, as you will also see, there's also a PowerPoint version of this where it works just as well. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Now, the real meat, I guess, and the beauty of this entire thing is not only transcribing spoken English, but converting it into the spoken, a different different language, which I've been seeing this technology happening to some other conferences, JALT conferences that I've attended. And in particular, they use PowerPoint for this. And I think a lot of people, when they see this, they think the person is speaking in Japanese. But what I found out is that there's an option that I'll show you shortly. And this option actually allows you to speak in one language and it comes out in the other language. And so in particular, I use this for some of my more content-based lectures. And so the students can keep up with what I'm saying. And I also use this for the first day of class so that everybody understands my rules and how I expect people to use my learning management system, which is Google Classroom. By doing so, there's no reason for them not to understand it. And so now what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you, I'm gonna sort of, now, if you can see here, this is the current presentation that I'm doing. To enable this feature, you go to slideshow. And once you go to slideshow, I'd like you to go to the section here that says always use subtitles and subtitle settings. Now, what's going to happen is you need to click on always use subtitles, but you have to also set it up with the subtitle settings. Now, there's two things here that you need to pay attention to. Spoken language is English, and now it has a variety of accents or languages where you have Canada and United Kingdom as well. I choose English, United States, and the subtitle language is Japanese because my students are Japanese. And so I'd like them to understand it in their own language. If you do this for the first time, PowerPoint will ask you for confirmation, and they will ask you, is it okay to use the microphone? Make sure what you're using is the wireless microphone and not the internal microphone. Everything's in place right now. I've clicked everything. And so I will now go from the current slide. And if it works correctly, you can see that I am now speaking and that it is translating it in this language, period. And you have a multitude of uses for this. One of it could possibly be, and for example, I'd like to show you another thing. Let me see. If I click on this, I think it will send me to a, okay. Oh, sorry. Well, the link was supposed to work, but apparently it's not, but you get the idea. So for example, if you had a lecture on, let's say, a grammar point, the grammar point that I chose was supposed to be the difference between using because and so. And if you would have that, if you were going to explain it to them, they would understand it more clearly by looking at the text, which is translated in their L1, their first language. And so, as you can see, you have the power of transcription this time, but also the power of translation as well, period. On the right side, of course, is for activity, and this is most of the time I use this as well, which is Google Translation, which I can show you real quickly. And what I do is I have this screen available for them and say, just a reminder for everyone, I'd like you to submit your thesis proposal by the end of this week, period. Those who submit it late will get deductions on their grade, period. Something really quick for them. Now, one thing that I'd like to interject while doing this is that sometimes the size can be an issue. And I have a shortcut at the shortcut slide at the end of my presentation, which basically shows you either for Windows or Apple, zooming in like that. So what I'm doing right now is I'm pressing the control key and I am scrolling my mouse button. And so sometimes when, depending on the class, I'll have to adjust the size of text. And this is what happens here when I use Google Translate. So as you can see, it's real quick and I can do this on my keyboard. And so it's important for them to see text and they can be able to read it depending on the size, of course, right? And this option, of course, I'm playing around with it on PowerPoint, and it's not yet available in PowerPoint, or technically you could do it by just zooming in on the screen. So play around with that, but you have to make sure that you understand these shortcuts because they are a lifesaver. And I included that at the end of the presentation for you guys as a reference. As you can see, the translation is still on. It's still ongoing, and you can see it right there. Yeah, so I use it for lectures and I use it to give activity instructions. This is my typical class. As you can see right there, I start by plugging in the laptop, getting my equipment ready. I gauge the energy level of the room, and I start with either small talk with my students, 5 to 10 minutes. I notice that if you do that, they tend to listen to you more because you approach to them more as a friend to friend level, casually. In the middle part of the class, I begin my lecture or my language activity. I rearrange the chairs if necessary. While they're doing the activity, I go around and I monitor the students. When this is happening, depending on if I have permission or not, I record a video of my lectures, and at the end of the class, I upload it to the learning management system along with the transcript of what I've been saying in class. I, of course, have to clean up all of my equipment and take off, recharge the batteries. If it's down to like 50%, I usually recharge them. And at the end of class, I also interact with them, not just on their learning management system, but on the line group. Sometimes if I observe an activity and they're having a really good time off of it, I take a video of it and then I send it to the line group. This is typically how I integrate transcription and technology in my class. One thing that I want to talk about before I finish is I had an interesting conversation the other day with one of my students, and he has this is a company that I teach and then one of my students has a kid, and what he said to me was very interesting. He said that he hasn't introduced anything sweet in terms of like soda or dessert to his child. And I was like, I found that really interesting in terms of like consumption behavior. And I think he's decided to only introduce sweets to his kid when they're 3 years old and above. Why am I telling you this story? It's because with any technology, as you can see here with this kid, she's experiencing sweets for the first time, and she is just basically overwhelmed about it. But then once she's had a taste of it, she'll probably taste it again and again, and she'll have like a craving for it. And it's the same thing for this type of technology. You don't want it to be a crutch. Some of my students have given me feedback and told me, Sensei, don't use it all the time, because sometimes we actually want to challenge ourselves by just hearing you speak, but without the assistance of this. And so we can learn more. And so again, so I would suggest that you introduce transcription with the caution to the students on its over-reliance, and make sure that to tell them that we're trying to make you enjoy the class, but at the same time, you won't always have technology to help you. And so a good balance is basically what this slide is saying. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time. These are the shortcuts, the references. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me right now. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope I didn't breeze too fast on some of the important slides. Thank you.
I would like to thank everyone. Thank Timmy for the wonderful presentation. And I would like to mention that there has been some very interesting questions. There's so many questions for you. We find it very, very fascinating. So before we move on to that, can we all unmute ourselves and give Tim a lovely round of applause? Thank you so much. Well done. So Tim, would you like to take a look at the questions, or would you like us to sort of speak up? Or
Sure. Rab here has a lot of interesting questions. Is there something like this for, I'll go through the list of them, and I'll start with question 1. And if I've missed anything, please tell me.
Can I just jump in for 1 second? I'm going to have to leave at 12 o'clock because I'm the room host for another session that comes on next with my students. So if I bail quickly, I'm not being rude. I really like the presentation, but I do have to be in the other room at 12.
Sure, no problem.
Actually, I think there's a lunch break, like an hour-long lunch break.
Was it not?
Yeah, I don't think there's a session right after this.
Not in this room, but there is in another room, no?
Oh, is there? I thought it was a lunch break. Madoka, do you remember?
No. I needed to go to the next room too.
Oh, you too?
At 12, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, 12:05. You're right. Sorry, my correction. Okay, go ahead, Rab.
Break will start at 12, sorry, 5.
Thank you.
So, okay. So I'll try to get to this as fast as I can. I looked into it, and then Apple Keynote unfortunately does not have this, nor does Google Slide, even though the API for the translation, I think, comes from Google Slide. So that sort of answers your second question. It does not come from DeepL, which I do think is the better translator at this point, at this stage. What was the feedback like in general for the students? I talked to my students. Some of them said that, Sensei, I actually enjoy and look forward to your activities now because I actually know what the hell it is I'm doing. And when I get into other deeper topics, such as when I tell them about a funny story, I actually get people that laugh now because they can see the translation happening. They're not laughing at the wrong translation. They're actually laughing with me and not at me this time. If you're talking about English and Japanese, that would be really confusing, wouldn't it? And I do agree to this point to a certain extent, but when it comes to grammar, I really can't use Japanese to explain it to them. I might be missing the idea, the main point of your question.
What I mean is it translates the English into Japanese. So if you're talking about English grammar in Japanese, translate the English words into Japanese, which absolutely confuse.
Right. I'm actually still looking into more ways to try to explain it. Oh, thanks, Rab.
I'll catch you later on, maybe during the break, and follow up on some of these points because I like this. Yeah, so I got to go to another room.
Sure. Please take care.
Cheers.
How can we get the PowerPoint?
Thank you.
So yeah, and but as you mentioned, like the grammar, yes, explaining something is always, especially grammar, is always a tricky thing. But for me personally, I tend to sort of explain it first in English, and if there are any stragglers in the end, I turn on the translation, and hopefully that clears things up. But if there's still some people that are confused, then I have to meet them after class to just really give them a better idea of what the grammar point is I'm trying to teach. But I completely understand what you're saying, though. So yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to let you know that this session has ended. So there's another session happening in rooms 1 and 2. but there's no session here. So if you guys want to, it depends on Timmy, I guess, if you can spare a few more minutes to deal with the questions. But otherwise, yeah, other
No
members, please
problem.
decide.
Just real quick, can we? I want to set this up. I want to do this myself. But can we get the PowerPoint? I did some screen shoots to get the information.
Yeah, Timmy, if you send us the PowerPoint, if you don't mind us putting it up on our website, OkiJALT.org
Sure.
site.
I'm gonna I can save. I'm gonna save this and as a PDF, and I'll send it to you shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So Kasumi will,
Thank you.
yeah, we'll let you know when that happens.